Yeah, I mean, I would just say to get on as many crews as possible because you need to work with other filmmakers. You need to collaborate with other filmmakers. You need to figure out, what they bring to the table in terms of what they know. I kind of don't like the stigma of like, I'm afraid to help this person, they might take my jobs. Yeah, so working with other filmmakers is a huge tool to not only grow as a filmmaker, but to help others. There's a lot of things I know and a lot of things, I probably don't know that I could learn from them. So you have to work with other people and not be afraid to do that.
All right, welcome back to the Crew Coffee Podcast. This is the podcast all about how to grow your experience as a filmmaker and do that by growing your crews and the people you're doing filmmaking with. I am so excited to have a really close friend of mine, Chad Kimbrel, on the podcast today. He's been a friend of mine for a long time and a filmmaker that has really challenged me to grow as a filmmaker myself. I feel like most of what I've learned about cinematography and editing has gone from really watching him make films as well as being able to work on projects with him. He's a professional editor first and foremost, but a ridiculously talented cinematographer and an award-winning director. So I'm really excited to talk with you, Chad.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So if you want to introduce what you do in the film industry, I'd love for you to give a brief explanation of who you are and what you love doing.
Yeah, like you said, my name is Chad. I've been mainly a video editor professionally for, I guess, the past 9 years, but also I've been a professional camera operator in live TV and independent film work. And then the past 5 years, I've tried to venture into the world of being a DP, trying to film my own stuff.
You've also had the opportunity to film a couple of short films that have won awards, haven't you?
Yeah, actually, so I went to college for TV and film production, and we had to film, a short film for one of our classes, and I directed that with a couple students, and I submitted it to the Southeast Emmy Awards. My professor was like, you got to submit it. So I went up against a couple colleges, and we won. So that was super exciting. I was very nervous going on stage, but in front of like a bunch of professionals. But so I would say that was probably my first film that I got to direct that I was proud of in a professional setting, I guess. So that was huge.
That's awesome. And what were some of the, what was the experience of making that film like?
I mean, honestly, the experience, we're in school, so we were learning a lot of how to film, how to do lighting, how to edit and everything. So it was kind of a beginner's course for a lot of people in the course, but I've been filming, doing this kind of stuff since I was in middle school. Going into college, there's a lot of, it's a learning curve for a lot of people. People are there brand new, never experienced any kind of filmmaking. So for me, it was kind of fun to work with people who, never have worked on a film set and just, take the reins as director.
Yeah. And was it difficult having to communicate a lot of these ideas, or was it fun just being able to teach as you were doing it?
No, I would say it was more of a learning experience for everybody, and it was just more of a fun experience. I wouldn't say it was hardcore in any sense, but, the passion I had for filmmaking, I really wanted to put, my best foot forward for that project.
I love that. And I think it's interesting to think about that in the context of a lot of different films that can be made and have been made is we expect to always be on the perfect set to have the best set experience. But some of my favorite sets that I've been able to work on, or at least just the experience of making the films, have been just unexpected that it would be that good. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So in some of that process, what do you think was some of the most difficult parts of making that film all around?
I would say the most difficult part was just having different ways to figure out how we were going to film it, because we didn't have a lot of equipment.
Yeah.
We had the equipment from the school, but in terms of dolly work or any types of difficult shots that we wanted to do, we just didn't have the right equipment to do it. So specifically, I wanted to do a nice tracking dolly shot in a room, and we didn't have anything, so we actually used a stroller
That's awesome.
So it worked out pretty well too. Like I was happy with the shot, but I mean, those are the things you just have to adapt on set, and you have to figure out like, well, how can we accomplish this? And that's one way we figured out how to do something.
That's awesome. And I feel like sometimes when you have those limitations, you have to like create something creative, which ends up getting you a really weird and unique shot. Like we've had a bunch of those moments where it's not expected, not the normal way, but because of that, you end up getting something more unique for the story that you wouldn't have expected before. And kind of segueing off of that, you and I have gotten to work on a handful of different films together. The first film I actually worked on in Atlanta, or big film, you actually were the DP on, and this is hilarious. Absolutely no hard feelings. I just think it's funny. My brother was the main producer on that film, and he wanted us to work on a film because my dream was to be a filmmaker, and Max wrote the film. And there was this whole process. We were chatting with him, and I was going to step in and be the DP. And then there was going to be a cam op with the DP, and you were going to be the cam op. And in reality, I was there, and you were the DP. And I think it's really funny to think about, 'cause like I just wanted to like get involved and be on set. My brother wanted me to have an opportunity, but we had such like a talented camera person that you were able to really provide a lot of value, and we're operating in a DP position, which that was originally the plan, which is really funny.
And no, it is funny, like you said, because I was talking a lot with the director Max about what he envisioned for the story. I mean, even like the beginning of the writing process. So I knew he wanted me to edit the film. So when I told him, I have this equipment, I can be on set. Like, I'd love to be on set to be a part of this. That's kind of where that came into play, because, and we can get into this a little later, but like as an editor, like I just visualize the story. From the very beginning, and I think being on set is a huge asset for anybody, to have their editor on set, because it helps them know what's being filmed, the dailies that are happening every single day, just to know visually how the story is going to play out.
That's huge. And I think that's something that a lot of times people don't consider. Even like I wasn't considering. I think like if I could describe what I was on that set the best, I was the king's little brother who wanted to have a position, but I was just whatever. Like I was just there. I was just like I was the PA that happened to be related to the producer. And so they gave me a position. And in a way, like if I look back, if I ended up actually being the DP on that set, the film would have been trash. Like it wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. But I think that so much of your experience on the set day, your ability to understand the edit, and even your involvement before we ever got involved as producers, was really what made the film so valuable, because you understood the story as a whole. And that I feel like is one of the biggest things I learned from that set day, was like who you have involved with your film is the number one factor to like what the film ends up being. Not just like, oh, do you have a good story? Do you have a good director is a big deal, but like, does a director have a good extension of himself? Because that's really what makes all those different pieces super important. And kind of piggybacking off of that with a question, what was it like shooting and DPing and not DPing Max's film? And even the film was Prone to Wander, which is an amazing film. I'm super excited to interview him, and then I'd love to talk to both of you at some point about the contrast. But I'd love to hear from you a little bit about the cinematography experience of the film as a whole.
Yeah, actually, like in our early conversations with Max and I, we were figuring out, what are the like big beats in the story that we want to, capture. And, as an editor, I was like, okay, well, this isn't, normally done by an editor, but I sat down and I wrote down a shot sheet, because I just wanted to lay it all out like in front of us to figure out, okay, this is how the story's going to go, and this is how it's going to play where we're filming and the locations we'll be at. So like part of that was actually being a DP and creating a shot sheet. So I created a shot sheet for every single day, every location. Now I will say the hardest part about that was, being on an independent film set, like we didn't know the locations ahead of time.
Yeah.
So when you get there, you have the shot sheet in front of you, and you're looking at all the shots and you're like, okay, I know we wrote down this as a shot, but like, this is where we're filming. Like, we're here now. We're trying to figure out, the location, like she's going to be in, the actor, or I should say actress, where we're going to film. And, you have to, you kind of have to change up your shot. I mean, not the movement, but, the location, the structure of like, is this going to be a good focal length or not? So you really have to figure that out. So it was kind of like the whole process was like fun because like I said, as an editor, it's fun to visualize how we're going to film it. And that's kind of like why I've ventured in, becoming a DP, is because I love being on set, because I love to know how I'm going to edit it. And,
That's huge.
I think that's the fun part about, being a DP on a film is like, I know I'm going to be the editor, so I know what I want. So I know what to do in post-production.
Exactly. That's huge. And it's funny to think about that and see that from that film to some of the films that we've worked on now. But you really start to develop an eye for good shots the more that you edit. Because like editing, first and foremost, is your first like big skill. And you're an excellent editor, just like very fast, very like talented. You understand how to build out a good structure for a scene. And I think that's really played into, probably more than anything, is just your ability to know what feels good and to know what you need. And a lot of filmmakers don't know how to do that. Even like people who can get a good shot don't understand how to lead in for an edit, or don't understand how to get coverage for a scene. That's one of the most frustrating things when I would do more event coverage kind of things, and I'd be editing for event coverage, and I'd see people not get like a scene and then the breakdown of that scene: face, hands, a wide, tight, emotion, motion, and those things that really make it easy for me to be able to cut to a scene to feel really good, especially for like the kind of shooting that we were doing. And I just want to laugh so hard at the fact that on that set day, we were like carrying dollies and a red and a bunch of different equipment like through a forest.
Yeah.
Like, and we'd never been there. We were looking at scenes. Max had said he'd seen stuff. And I remember like,
we got our work in.
Yeah,
we got our workout for the day.
I was so fit for that week. I felt so good. And it was hilarious because I look at the BTS footage and it looks like we're the Hobbit.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it looks like we're on like horses carrying all this film gear through the woods, like trying to
off
do
the
something.
beaten path.
I know. And I would literally grab the BTS camera to get some behind the scenes from one of the PAs because I didn't want to carry all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, that was part of the whole process, is like we never saw this location, like any of us. I mean, not even Max, the director, like he just got it out of nowhere, and we're like, yes, let's do it. It's a bunch of land there by some water, and we're like, okay, let's go there. So like we were just learning, like, okay, well, the water's like a mile up that hill, so we're gonna have to carry all of our equipment up there.
That's so big. And I think that plays into a lot of the shots that we get. Like I remember even little moments where we'd like be walking and see a scene that looks cool, and we're like, this would really tie in well for the story. And a lot of times like planning helps. Planning is useful, but when you don't have all of this structure and you do have the story structure or the shot list structure, you're able to kind of improvise and be inspired as you're moving throughout the scene. Which I think really plays well for the whole edit that we were doing, because even the story itself was this idea of not being really certain where we were going. And I feel like the set day really influenced that a lot, because we were coming up with this stuff on the day.
Yeah, we really were. I mean, and we were fighting daylight.
Yes.
I mean, one of the scenes like we couldn't get to, so we had to switch it to like a night scene. But we worked with that. We made it work, and it was actually one of like Max's favorite scenes of that day. So
that was so much fun because it ended up being nighttime, and we didn't have the generator near there for like some of the lighting. So we put up these LED panels to like make it look like moonlight, and it was fun. Like there was the limitation and we have to get this scene for something really cool for the story, because I feel like even that scene overall, it helped add some distance whenever you did the edit, which is a whole different conversation I want to have on another podcast.
Yes.
So kind of piggybacking off of that, because we can talk for days about that film particularly. I really want to kind of talk with you and contrast the experience on that set to two different sets that I think both of the images on all three of these films that we've worked on together are beautiful. The experiences on set were all very different, and the films themselves I have a lot of different value for. So like I think it was a couple of years later, I had you DP for a big Easter project I was working on. And I actually liked the whole pre-pro process, the production process, but I don't love the edit. Like, I mean that with so much like sadness, but like it was an okay edit. There was a lot of reasons why that ended up being so. But there was, what I do remember is just how quickly on set you were able to get what I wanted without me having to like ask you. But I'd love to hear from you a little bit about your thoughts on the cinematography from the Easter project and things that you loved and even some of the things that you learned in creating that film.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you approached me about the Easter project, you said, this edit is going to just follow a song. And so when you talked to me about it, we're like, okay, we're going to go out into this field. We're going to film a lot here. And then we're going to film at this house that I think you rented on Airbnb. Yes. And then we're just going to, it's basically following this bride preparing for her wedding day. So, contrast to Prone to Wonder, like you said, we had a much bigger crew. So, it gave me the chance to just focus solely on, the shots that need to be done, the shots that were planned ahead of time, while other people can help me out, get the camera ready, get, everything ready. When you're on a smaller set, you kind of have to, take over, all these roles. You have a bunch of different hats,
Yeah.
So on this one, I was solely just like capturing everything, trying to come up with different unique shots that also told the story in this unique way that was kind of like these small vignettes, throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
So like we didn't really sit down and talk about like the overarching idea of the whole thing, but I know you created a shot sheet of like these certain shots that you wanted.
Yes.
And then we kind of adapted, to how we would film that when we got, on set, and figure out what we needed to work with, the lighting we had to work with, like where the position of the sun was, and, the timing of that too. I remember we wanted like the specific shot of the proposal.
Yep.
Where he wants to put on the ring, and we were just like trying to finish these other shots before the sunset, and we're like, the sun's setting right now, we gotta rush to the other side of the park and get this right now. So that was probably probably the most fun part of that shoot, was just like rushing to the other side because the lighting was perfect. It was golden hour. We're like, we have to get this shot, and that was just like, like we just had to, run and gun and just get all those shots. Like there was no time for setup. I was running with a slider on a tripod and, getting all these shots, but it worked out, and I think that's part of like what you said earlier about like composition, is just knowing like how I'm going to compose this shot and how I'm going to make this work in terms of the certain focal lengths that you need, and the focal lengths, you got to get your tight, you got to get your wide, but you got to get it in this, short amount of time.
For real. And something I feel like is really fun to talk about this entire film is we almost didn't use any lighting at all. Almost. Like for that entire film. We did use some for the nighttime.
At least outside. Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, even inside, I think at one point we might've used a lamp, like for that one shot. There was two scenes. One where she was looking at the mirror. We had a light up top. And that one was, I liked how dynamic that felt. And then we used another scene where there was a lamp in it. And then the only other scene that we used lighting in was whenever we did the campfire scene at night. And we ended up only using that to light up some of the trees in the background to help add some depth. But what I thought was really interesting was like the camera that we were using was the Pocket 4K, which is your choice in camera. And I love the Pocket 4K. But what's great about like using that on the short is we had so many different scenarios And we were able to really adjust super quickly for all the different scenarios. Like we could bump it up to 10,000 ISO without being worried, or have it at 100 ISO. And then we could watch. The most valuable thing for the entire film was how easy playback was. Like we'd be watching, we'd be doing the film, and I'd want to look at a scene, and you'd pull your camera up and you play back, and it looked awesome. The screen was big. You could scrub through it and find the scenes. Like that was my favorite thing whenever we were shooting, was just being able to play with the playback. But even more than that, you were able to get really depthy, beautiful scenes without a lot of lighting going on in the situation. And I remember asking you, like, all right, what are your thoughts on this scene? What kind of lighting we should bring? And you were like, hey, if it's a good location, we could probably like not have to light it as much. And so I spent a lot of time on Airbnb trying to find the house location. And I found one that had this massive window, which I feel like played really well. And there was like bookcases on it, and it felt really good for the whole setup. But I'd love to hear from you about how you go about shooting in scenarios where you don't necessarily have like a grip crew or a lighting crew to be able to create exactly the lighting that you want.
Well, yeah, and I think that, plays into what you were saying, in terms of like the ability to use like a smaller camera. In like contrasting to Prone to Wonder, we had a big red, and that's a beast. Like if it's all, caged out with everything.
Yeah.
But, on this one, yeah, we used a Pocket 4K, and it's just so easy to like just run around and grab shots. So like going into this one, knowing like we're filming all outside, I knew it just had like the natural look for, exterior shots. And it honestly, it's more about focusing on the right shots, the right composition, and the right focal lengths before the lighting. And I say that not that lighting is not important, but like when you're dealing with natural light, like you're just dealing with the position of where your actors are, or your subjects are.
That's big.
So it's really just figuring out like you were saying, like I wanted to find like a good location, because I feel like that's a big part of storytelling as well. Like the location is a big part, and it's not always like in your face, but it could be like something subtle in the background that you're like, that looks good. That's part of the story,
Yeah.
So that's why I was like pushing like, hey, let's find a unique house to film in, because yeah, we can go film at any normal house, but like what's going to be unique about the story is the location that the actors are in and how they're using it, in the story.
Yeah, that's huge. And it was funny because the location we found was actually, it was a cool location, but it was also just like a weird story behind the location. It was like this older dude's house. It had so much stuff in it, and he let us use all of the stuff in it as props, which that was a godsend. Like he said, we can move anything around if we put it all back perfectly. So we like created this entire story with I think I spent $60 on the Airbnb. And honestly, I think we got like a couple hundred, like probably like $1,000 worth of value out of that house, just because we found like the right location. And then I love hearing this from you. And even just looking at like, because I'm a big advocate for lighting. I think lighting, like shaping light, is one of the most important things in cinematography or just filmmaking. But when we were shooting, we didn't have the time, and we were able to cut out a massive portion of time that we would have spent lighting the scenes by literally just finding good spots that looked really good and that told the story. And that was just more pre-pro than it was on the production day, because we didn't have the time to do like 6 production days. This was super micro budget, as well as like we had to like find all of the different scenes in those small days to tell a really large story. And I feel like it ended up like visually, it ended up really accomplishing what we were looking for. But what was really intriguing was how much we were able to how much time we were able to save and still tell a good story.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of those shots they had like the location had big windows where a lot of light was coming through. So basically we just had to figure out how to diffuse that. And then like on top of that, it's like, we need to add atmosphere. So, we pulled in like the smoke machine I brought, we were wafting it around in the air just to, have that atmosphere of, the light coming through the smoke, the air, and everything. So like that's part of it too. But I know specifically like you just have to figure out the composition and work with what you have and in terms of lighting and natural light.
And it's fun to like the project overall visually beautiful. I feel like it like I'd still like to make a second edit from it to maybe get like a more interesting story, because I feel like the story to the music just felt thin.
And we had so much footage.
We had so much
good
footage
that wasn't used in the final edit.
For real. Like, I feel like I part of me wanted to do like voiceover with like a bunch of different scores to be able to tell just a completely different story, because the footage itself was just gorgeous, like really, really, really potential story there. So I might have to take a look at that at some point this year and maybe use it as like a how to redo a film when you don't have anything to redo it with. Yeah, I feel like that'd be fun. And in kind of moving forward to contrast, even we had a big set, and that was like it wasn't a small micro set, because we had a couple actors, some actresses, and then we had a set dresser, which I really wanted for that, just to be able to go and be involved in the set. Then we had a couple of PAs, as well as like one of the actors ended up acting as a PA because they weren't in that many scenes, but they wanted to be involved in on set. So we had like a handful of hands on set. And then contrasting that, which was like weeks and weeks of pre-pro. I think it was like 2 months of pre-pro actually before we actually shot. And then contrasting that with the film that we most recently worked on together, which was a film that I wrote and directed for the Thunderdome. And that was that the idea came the same week that we shot it. I think I ended up getting the final idea a day before we shot. We found the location the day that we were shooting. I got 3 actors, and that's all we had. That's right. It was just the actors. Yeah. And they were super excited and passionate about the project. And so some of them acted as like sound guys or PAs throughout the film as well, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you got to get that, you know?
For real.
I mean,
and honestly, for me, and like with a lot of respect for the project prior that we worked on, that was probably my favorite thing that you and I have been able to work on. And we had so much limitation. I think I edited it the next night because we had to have it done for the competition the next day. And it was 2 locations. It was 3 different rooms, but it was a lot more fun. I feel like we were free to actually have fun with the film wherever it ended up. I feel like there was a lot more like creative language that was going on in it. And you were acting mainly as a DP and I was acting as the director. But I would come in and help light some of the scenes because we weren't like tied down by roles. And for me, like it's to this day, one of my favorite films that I've gotten to make, like written, shot, edited. I love that film. And I feel like I learned the most about like storytelling from it. I was curious to know from you, like, what was your thoughts on like the films and the shots that we got throughout that?
No, like you said, it was for the Thunderdome, you know, like a short film competition, but it was a minute, you know, you had to figure out what we can capture and what we can put in a story in a minute. And like, I remember when you came to me with like the whole story and I was like, how are we going to fit all that in a minute? So that was like the difficult part of like, man, you really have a lot of like emotions and like certain beats that you have to hit in this like short, but like you have like different times and you know, you just have a lot to deal with to fit into a minute. And that was the hardest part. But I think when we started filming and capturing the scenes, I'm like, okay, this is going to work. We're, you know, like we're setting up shots for different types of moments, different types of sorry, let me start it over.
You're good.
We're setting up the scene for different types of moments, different times of day. We even had like a campfire scene again. So I mean, it was
campfires, dude.
That was like the tough part, but the fun part of figuring out, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to capture? And how can we, you know, get all the points that we need to finish this film? And I think we did a good job of doing that and capturing that.
Yeah, I do too, man. It was a lot of fun, like learning. I feel like for one thing, my knowledge of lighting really grew from the last film to this film. But on top of that, like we did this with like 2 lights and I still feel like it was fairly dynamic. We had an aperture 300D, and then you had your little aperture smaller light. And we used that to get like a book light at one point, and then we used it to do a light through a window for like daytime, and then we changed it and made it tungsten for a nighttime scene on the same
Nighttime, yep.
Yeah, and it was just like all of these different things with the one light. And then we did like an edgy thing where we had like blue light in a scene, and that was keying her as kind of a soft source. And then for like the outside scene, we literally only used the campfire to light her. And so it was just like finding weird ways to be creative with the lighting to really make the scene dynamic. And I think you mentioned it really well, is like, I was so surprised how much we were able to tell in that limitation of 1 minute. Like, I feel like I could experience the entire character's story. And it really did challenge my mind as to like, how much time do I need to care about somebody? And do I need to hear about all of the exposition, or do I need to go in and actually experience those moments? Because it was kind of similar. It was a narrative with audio, but it was kind of a music video, as in she started playing a song that somebody made for her, and then we went into memories with the audio. So there was like feelings and emotions and memories. So the whole narrative was non-linear, but it still felt like there was an ability to care about the character, which I think is the most important thing when you're telling the story.
Yeah, and like you said with the lighting, we were able to use lighting to capture the different emotions the character was going through.
Yeah.
We had the soft warm light during, like the happy times, good times, the bright light morning time for, some more happy moments, but then you start, going through the story and like, her emotions change, and that's where we threw in like that hard tungsten, like at night, and then the blue in the hallway, you really capture that emotion, that basically a roller coaster of emotions that the character was going through.
I think that's huge, because it's there's like a bunch of different kinds of tools to get those emotions through, rather than just saying give a good performance. Like, we had amazing actors and actresses. It was Audrey and it was John, and they just crush it. Like, I asked Audrey, I gave her a couple of minutes to like really press into her character, and then John and her just bounced off of each other so well. But I feel like if we had left it to just that, people would have liked it, and I think it would have still been a good film. But all of the different things added on top of it, even like we did a couple of scenes where we were at 14 millimeters to really feel like awkward and uncomfortable, and all the little pieces added together, I feel like, is what made the film so interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
And it didn't take that much time.
Project. No, it didn't. Like, we filmed it like in 5 hours. Yeah.
It was 5 hours of shooting. We could have made like a 5-minute film out of that too. Like, if we had let things breathe, which I think it would have been maybe more like a 3 or 4 minute film. But there was so much that got covered in such a short amount of time. And like, that was the film that really got me thinking, oh my gosh, we could make a feature in a week.
Yeah.
Like, we could shoot, if we write the right script, then we can make a 60-minute film in a week and be half alive. Because we did that from 4 p.m. to like 11, or maybe 6 to 11. It might have been 6 to 11. I don't remember exactly. But yeah, there's so many different things that I feel like people don't take into account whenever it comes into like, what are you limited on in your filmmaking? Like, you're one of my favorite examples of, you don't have X skill, but you have a really, really good B skill. And then you're practically an 18 player because you're so good at that other skill that if anybody else that's even remotely good at that other thing comes in and works with you, like, that person shines just because you're so good at making them look good, as well as you're amplified from being so good at your skill. And I think it's like, a lot of filmmakers feel like they need to be a master cinematographer, a master gaffer, a master director. Like, all that you need to be is good at a thing that matters to you, which for you is a lot of coverage, editing, and cinematography. Like, and you're able to bring in other people to really cover the rest of the bases. And I think that like, so many filmmakers struggle to comprehend that they don't have to be like the perfect filmmaker. They need to have a really good crew around them.
Yeah, I think part of that is, collaborating with the right people that you can work really well with, that are passionate about the project too. I think you can easily be on a set where, people really don't care. They're just there just to be there. But when you have a small group of people who are passionate about the whole project, that's where like really good collaboration comes in, where people bounce off each other's ideas, like, hey, why don't we try this? That's what I've done a lot, in like the projects I've DP'd, is like, those are the moments that you need to focus on, like, while you're filming, is, hey, why don't we try this instead?
Yeah.
Mention that to the director. The director's like, yeah, let's try that. It's like these little moments. Like I always told Max, when we were filming, I was like, hey, I know like we have these shots, but like, let's try to add this. I think this would help. And I think that's part of, being an editor. I'm like, I want to have as much coverage as possible. So if we can get this type of B-roll or this type of shot, it'll help the emotion of the story. You got to focus on the emotions of the actors as well as a DP.
That's huge.
Yeah, because if you're just focusing on camera work, that's all you're focusing on. You have to have, also the hat of a director on while you're DPing, because there are certain times where you're filming an emotional scene where you might have to, move in a little bit closer or capture the right angle of the emotion that they're going through. And I think that's feeling it in the moment. And that's what makes like a good cinematographer, is like to film that, but also have the know-how of like where the emotion is going in a scene.
Yeah, and that's so big. And I think that like the more that you work on different projects, directing your own projects, as well as like getting to do like work on other people's projects, really helps you get a better ability to wear more than one hat at the same time, because it's different when you're working on a more like high-end set. And I see the value of it. Sometimes
Right.
I get frustrated with it, but I definitely see the value of it. Like I worked on a set just recently where everybody was in their roles. Like I was just the AD and the director was just the director. And it had so much value to the level of we got a massive amount of coverage and a massive amount of like really good coverage in a very, very short amount of time. And what I loved about that, in contrast to like some of the projects that we've worked on, is it when you put in the pre-pro work and you put in the work on the pre-end, you can flow very easily on set. But to learn how to put that work in on the pre-end, you have to be willing to do it poorly and ridiculously and in a messy way where you're learning on sets that don't matter. Like as much as I love the film that you and I made, it was a set that didn't matter. Like if we ended up not doing all those creative things, we would have been fine. But being able to play, because we had that freedom, I feel like we could take the risk to do fun things. And so there's definitely an importance to both, but I think that there's a value in knowing the reasoning for both so that you don't hate either.
Yeah. And I think there's like a lot of structure involved with like, more professional sets.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I like independent, sets as well, because like, you want to have that structure, but you also have that ability, to break free of like, the script and be like, okay, this isn't working. Let's try this instead. I know specifically like when we were working on Prone to Wander, like we were trying to film everything in 3 days.
Yeah.
And I told Max from the very beginning, I know you have 3 days set up, but we can't just film and have everything. And then when we're in the edit and we're like, this isn't working, that's it. We have the ability to go out and film, do a pickup scene, like, and like having the option of doing that is helpful in the edit overall. So I wouldn't just say like, these are the set days that we need to film. And then that's it, like the ultimate goal is to tell the story well. And if you need more pickup shots to help tell the story well, you need to take that into account.
That's huge.
So I think that's huge when, and it's only if you can, you got to work with your actors, your crew. But even when we did a short pickup scene, I think that just changed the whole thing for Prone to Wonder.
Yeah.
It just helped the story, come together. And, Max agreed, and we got, a small crew together to film it, and it worked out well.
That's
so
huge.
I think, having the ability to do that is going to help the film overall, if you don't capture everything you planned on, in the days that you shot.
That's big. And again, it's like there's a benefit to both, but there's a need for both. So it's not even like oh, you do your way, you do my way. Like, I feel like a lot of people, especially in creative spaces, talk about like, well, this is just how I do it, or this is how I do it, or like saying this is the right way or this is the wrong way. But I think that there's a need to go through both of the experiences to be able to make the best films possible. Because
Right.
you do not learn as much as you could whenever you learn the right way and when you learn the wrong way, and go through the
Right.
experiences of both of those things. So
Yeah. Yeah.
along those lines, I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the projects that you're excited to work on in the coming years? We've talked a little bit about one of the story ideas that you had involved somewhat in the VR world, but I'd love to hear what's coming up next for you.
I mean, yeah, for the longest time, I'd like to break into writing. I haven't written anything yet. And I know, like, as a director, I haven't directed anything really since since I was in college, but like, I would like to focus on a story of my own, and obviously if it's a story of my own, I have to write it myself. So
Yeah,
focusing on figuring out how to write a story is like my next big step.
that's awesome.
Not just because I feel like I got to write something, but I want to tell my own story, and I want to direct my own story. And if you're going to direct your own story, you better write a good one.
Yeah,
So that's mainly my goal, aspirations for this year or the coming years is, like, if I want to direct, I want to write my own content. Not to say like I'm not willing to work with others if they have a good story, but usually, working with independent, filmmakers, people who want to make their own story have written their own stories. I
yeah.
know that's what Max did. I know that's what you did. So that's my next step. But if I don't get to that, I still want to be on set. I still want to film. I still want to be the DP of the films I'm editing.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking forward to, and I want to do more of it, and not just like do more of it just by myself, but with new people, new actors, working with more talented people that I haven't worked with before.
That's big. That's super big. And I think that, like, that's one of the biggest parts of the process of even just growing as a filmmaker is working with different and just more experienced filmmakers. Even you having gone to film school are still educating yourself by working with more talented filmmakers every day. So I'd love to hear any last takeaways that you'd give to filmmakers to grow their own personal careers, as well as being able to grow with other crews.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say to get on as many crews as possible, because you need to work with other filmmakers. You need to collaborate with other filmmakers. You need to figure out, what they bring to the table in terms of what they know, what they don't know, like working back and forth. I think that's one of the biggest, things about being an independent filmmaker is, like, you can help other people. Like, I kind of don't like the stigma of, like, I'm afraid to help this person become a better editor because they might take my jobs.
Yeah.
That, like, that's not who I am. Like, I want to help people figure out things and know how to edit or film better by mentoring them. And I think that's where you not only create, like, this good working relationship with people, but you're becoming better in terms of knowing different roles and helping people learn stuff that they wouldn't know. So working with other filmmakers is like, let me cut back. Let's go back.
No, you're great.
Yeah, so working with other filmmakers is a huge tool to help you not only grow as a filmmaker, but to help others, help mentor others. I think that's like one of my goals is I want to help out other editors. You know, there's a lot of things I know and a lot of things, I probably don't know that I could learn from them. So you have to work with other people and not be afraid to do that.
That's so good. Well, sweet. Thank you so much for coming on, man. Dude, you've been a huge part in really helping me grow as a filmmaker over the past couple of years, from everything from directing to DP work and editing, especially recently. So I'm excited to see what you're going to be doing in the next couple of years as a filmmaker. And thank you guys for listening to the Crew Coffee podcast. If you enjoyed it, I'd love for you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And we're now on Spotify and the Apple podcast. So if you go over there and leave a review and like it, it really helps other people listen on the specifically Apple podcast. Apparently, most of the viewership from there grows from there, more people that leave 5-star ratings. So I'd love to hear what you think about the conversations. And if it's a negative review, please leave it. I'd love to grow as a podcast host and as a content creator overall. So I'm excited to grow in this next season.